Hello and welcome back to the Badass Literature Society, where badasses come together to rate and review novels recommended by you. We're back. Welcome to Season 5. Hi, I'm Michael.
This is Barbara.
And I'm Lauren. This month we read More Than Life, a YA historical fantasy by Bethanie Finger.
Yes, and a little bit about Bethanie. She is a writer, reader, and a librarian. In 2021, she graduated from the University of Southern Mississippi with a master's in library and information sciences. She has worked in public libraries and local bookshops and currently works as a school librarian. When she's not writing, she enjoys hiking, podcasting, and exploring the world. She happily lives in Nevada with her husband, their 2 dogs, Scamp and Beowulf, and an ever-growing TBR collection.
Don't we all have that?
And yes, you might recognize that name because Bethanie has been a guest on this podcast before. When we read Cinder by Marissa Meyer, she came on and was as a guest because her podcast is all about that series. So she came on and talked with us about that.
The author, and
yes, and about Marissa Meyer, but it started out as a podcast about that series. Okay, Barbara, you want to tell us a little bit about the book?
Yes, this was originally published on February 13th, 2024. Shout out Taylor Swift, anyone? No? Okay. Genre is historical fantasy. It is 436 pages. Currently has a 4.6 out of 5 on Goodreads and a 4.6 on Amazon. It has not been nominated or won any awards as of this podcast recording. And we think it's important for readers to know what, if any, representation is in the books we read. So for this book, there are minor POC characters, minor LGBTQ characters, and no characters with disabilities.
All right. And Lauren, do you want to give us a brief synopsis of the book?
Sure. So this is a tale of grief, love, and magic interweaved. The first of a series, you get to just dip your toes into the world building and magical powers of the characters, and you'll either be really happy or really angry at the end when the author leaves you with the cliffhanger of all cliffhangers. That was my little synopsis, but I'll read the back of the book for actual reference. So a gripping story of overcoming grief, self-realization, and embarking on the adventure of a lifetime. As the daughter of a high-ranking sea captain, 19-year-old Cordelia Kimbal lives a life of luxury in the seafaring kingdom of Mikiria. But when her father dies unexpectedly, she is stripped of her title and home and forced to join the working class in order to survive. Determined to rise above her losses, Cordelia is eager to prove her worth and stand on her own. But 4 months after her father's passing, a mysterious letter arrives revealing the secret location of a mythical island of Qualaris. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but that's how I pronounced it.
That's how I pronounced it.
Okay. Known for concealing the secrets of magic and eternal life, Qualaris is often dismissed as mere legend, but Jaspar, Cordelia's father's enigmatic apprentice, is convinced of its existence and its harboring its secrets that the dark enchanter Janus would stop at nothing to obtain. For generations, Jaspar and his ancestors have pursued the discovery and rescue of Qualaris while battling a curse of non-existence, and he believes that Cordelia is the island's true protector, the one who can save it and its people from Janus's impending threat. Faced with the daunting task of defending Qualaris and its people, Cordelia embarks on a quest to locate the island, embrace her birthright, and take on the darkest enchanter in history. If she doesn't, the island and its people won't be the only casualties of Janus's war. Join Cordelia on her journey as she navigates a world of magic, mystery, and danger, discovering her true self and the strength within her. Sorry.
You're not going to give the content warning that Bethanie has on there. I thought that was pretty funny.
Okay, content warning. More Than Life is the first book in the More Than Life trilogy and ends on a cliffhanger. See, and I did not read the back of the book before, so I was not adequately prepared for
Me neither.
that.
I literally had no idea that, I didn't read this, and so I didn't realize that she told you that there was a cliffhanger.
I would have greatly appreciated
it. The back of the book is from Goodreads, and I read it when I was probably at, I don't know, 75%, because I think that's when I started putting the notes together, the outline and everything. And I was like, oh, it's going to end on a cliffhanger. And I was like, I wonder how big of a cliffhanger it is if it's mentioned in the thing. And we'll talk about that later. We're not going to.
That would have been so nice to know. I think I would have read it with a different lens. Also, just knowing, I also didn't realize, and we may have talked about it and I just didn't listen, that this was going to be a trilogy. So I think that impacted the way that I read it too, and kind of some of my frustrations that I'll talk about later. But if I would have read that little blurb there, I think it would have been helpful.
I think you guys are I don't think we knew it was a trilogy all along, but I think we've always known it was at least going to be two of them because
Yeah.
Bethany had already talked to us about that there was another one coming, and so I don't think we didn't know it was a trilogy. I don't think at the time, but we did at least know there was going to be a sequel.
Well, I think I repressed that.
Apparently so, but there's going to be 3. The sequel actually comes out like next month or something. I think
It's already on
super
Goodreads.
fast.
Like it already has reviews on Goodreads, so people have
early
gotten
access.
advanced copies. Yeah.
Mm.
But anyway, we move on. So let's talk about it. What did you think of More Than Life, a YA historical fantasy? And remember, this is the first half. No spoilers.
So overall, I enjoyed it. It was a little slow at the beginning for me, but I was super intrigued by the world and the characters. I really enjoyed the world building and the magic system. But I think it's definitely a character-driven story. But I have a feeling that the second book will be more plot-driven since it needed to establish the characters, I feel like, in the first book. So I feel like it's going to gear more towards like plot, at least I think, for the second one. And I'm good with character driven stories. Like I've never been one of those people who had a problem with that. If anything, I prefer that over plot driven if the characters are really well written.
So I agree with a lot of what Barbara said. I also overall really enjoyed it. I thought it was a really interesting story, and I am excited to continue reading and figure out what happened. But like she said, it was a little bit slow at the beginning, but when I went back and thought about it, and I was like, okay, so if it was slow at the beginning, is there anything that that could be removed or like sections that can be cut out? Because a lot of times in books, when we talk about them being slow, it's pretty easy to go and find like, okay, well, this part wasn't really needed. And with her book, there's probably some sections you could argue that, but I really think that even through the slower part of the book, it was all important because it was all building, like Barbara said, building these characters and building them the way that they're supposed to be. And without all of that slower build up and character building, I don't think we would have had as clear of a picture of Cordelia or Delia when we got to the latter half of the book. And so I really liked it. I think that the character building was great. I enjoyed the characters. I thought the world building was also really cool. The magic system and everything. It was good, and I'm excited to see where the series goes from here.
Yeah, overall, I enjoyed it. It was definitely a slow burn for me as well. I didn't get super into the story or plot until around the halfway point, maybe shortly past the halfway point. But I was definitely invested in the characters well before then. Like, I really liked the character, I guess, development that happened. I do think that there were some maybe dialogue and like details that could have been left out to kind of move the story along a little bit quicker. But I think that since now I know that this is the first of a series, I think it's important that the author kind of built on the characters' backgrounds. I do wish I would have, and I'll get into this later, I wish we would have gotten a little bit more background for some characters that we maybe didn't get, but I do feel like I really enjoyed it. I think the character arcs we see are good, and yeah, I enjoyed the toe dipping we got of the magical realm as well that she's kind of creating. So I'm looking forward to kind of seeing where that goes.
All right. So as you know, we're not going to go into our individual ratings at this point. Got to wait till the end for that. But our group score for this book was a 7 out of 10. So in that case, would you recommend this book? Yes, I think it's pretty easy to recommend. I think that anybody who enjoys fantasy would enjoy this. I think that, I guess it like anything we read that's YA, if there's someone that is in your group of reading friends that just hates the YA genre, then maybe don't recommend this to them because they're probably not going to like it. But as YA fantasy goes, I thought it was good. And anybody who is into that, I think could enjoy this. I also think that it's one of those, we talk about some of these fantasy and sci-fi books that have the ability to like bridge that gap between people who maybe don't always read fantasy and sci-fi. And I think this could possibly be one of those books because it is a very character-driven story and it is fantasy. It takes place in a fantastical world, but because it's historical fantasy, a lot of it, with the exception of the magic, is rooted in reality. And so I think there's a lot of people that maybe wouldn't traditionally pick up like a Brandon Sanderson book or some of those heavier fantasy novels that you could recommend this to, and it'd be like an entry point possibly.
So just a little side comment on, if you have friends that don't like YA, then you just get rid of them because those are not friends.
You don't need that kind of negativity.
You don't need
in
that
your
kind
life.
of negativity in your life, exactly. But Michael pretty much took the words right out of my mouth. I think anyone who enjoys YA fantasy would really enjoy this. It's what I consider light fantasy. Not that like there's no fantasy in the aspect. It's not like a Game of Thrones fantasy where you're like, the heck, because like sometimes I feel like that's a little overwhelming and it's a lot to take in. And I feel like this one, I think intentionally, and that's why I think we're gonna get in like the second and third book more of that aspect of the fantasy, and so it's not so daunting for people who normally don't read fantasy to pick this one up, which I think is a good thing, because sometimes I feel like if you want to read this type of book and you're a little hesitant on the fantasy aspect, it's a nice introduction fantasy book, as people call it. And I see a lot of that on Book Talk where people recommend different books where it's not so heavy, like Game of Thrones or Brandon Sanderson, even though I've never... Have we? Well, we did. I have read his book. I'm thinking...
Elantris is the one that we read, yeah.
You know, so it's easily digestible if you're kind of hesitant on the fantasy aspect of books.
Yeah, I think if you enjoy YA fantasy, that this is a good one. I don't think I put on here that I think I would preface it with that this is the first of a series and is a little slow to start. However, apparently Bethanie prefaced that herself, and I just did not read the back of the book before reading it. So, but I do think I would tell anybody that I recommended it to that it's a little bit slow to start so that people are prepared to not give up on it, because it does really pick up at that kind of 60% mark. And so I think I would tell people just stick with it, learn about the characters, and then it gets really good.
So for those of you leaving us, don't forget to give us a rating if you do like us, if the app you're listening to allows you to. And follow us on both Instagram and Facebook. In both places, our handle is @BadassLitPod. We would love to hear from you. If you have a book you want us to read, let us know. Now, for a short preview of our next episode. Next month, we are reading A Magic Steeped in Poison by Judy I. Lim.
For Ning, the only thing worse than losing her mother is knowing that it's her own fault. She was the one who unknowingly brewed the poison tea that killed her, the poison tea that now threatens to also take her sister Shu. When Ning hears of a competition to find the kingdom's greatest Shinangshe, masters of the ancient and magical art of tea making, she travels to the imperial city to compete. The winner will receive a favor from the princess, which may be Ning's only chance to save her sister's life. But between the backstabbing competitors, bloody court politics, and a mysterious and handsome boy with a shocking secret, Ning might actually be the one in more danger. Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun, dun.
I'm sorry, anytime someone says poison, my mind just goes, Cusco's poison. The poison for Cusco. The poison made for Cusco.
I think a lot of millennials probably have that same thought. Now, remember, the second part of this episode is an in-depth look at More Than Life, a YA historical fantasy. So if you do want to read it, stop listening now and come back when you're done to listen to the second half. Nom Nom is fresh dog food made by real people who really care. They're purposeful and enthusiastic about giving your dog the best food for them and their health, so they can thrive and be their best. Nom Nom delivers fresh food made with whole ingredients backed by veterinary science. And science tells us that dog health starts in the bowl, so improving their diet is one of the best ways to help them live a long, happy life. All you have to do is order, pour, and serve. Barbara and I have 2 dogs, Luna, a husky, and Quinny, a Shih Tzu mix. Our 2 dogs love the beef mash recipe, but to be honest, I'd say Quinny's favorite is the turkey fare. She drools when that comes out of the fridge. Yes, I know, Luna. I'm going to tell them about that right now. Luna is an extremely picky eater and always has been. She usually takes forever to warm up to new food, but not with Nom Nom. She dove in immediately. Both dogs seemed to have more energy, and Luna's stools were no longer soft. Your dog's health starts in the gut. A better diet means softer coats, more energy, better breath, and smaller, more consistent stools. Your dog can't tell you if they're healthy, but you can tell when their health improves. It's the easiest way to take the guesswork out of feeding your dog the best. Nom Nom meals are pre-portioned for your dog's exact caloric needs. Board-certified vet nutritionists are kind of a big deal, and Nom Nom has 2 on staff that work extensively to ensure everything gets sent out is the very best for your dog's livelihood. So how does Nom Nom work? You tell them about your pup, age, breed, weight, allergies, and protein preferences. Then they tailor a specific amount of individually packaged Nom Nom meals and send them straight to you. Store the meals in the freezer or fridge until it's mealtime. They'll give you specific instructions on how to transition your dog from foods like kibble to always fresh nom nom for best results. Watch your dog clean their dishes, dance for dinner, and overall thrive. Ready to make the switch to fresh? Order Nom Nom today. Go to a link in the description of this episode and then use our referral code BADASSLIT. That's BADASSLIT and get 50% off your first order plus free shipping. Plus, Nom Nom comes with a money-back guarantee. If your dog's tail isn't wagging within 30 days, Nom Nom will refund your first order. No fillers, no nonsense, just Nom Nom. Now, for those of you sticking around for the spoilers, here we go. As always, we'll start off with the Badass Character Award. Barbara, who did you nominate for the Badass Character?
So I feel like Cordelia should get like an honorable mention because of everything she went through. But I was just putting myself in someone's perspective, and I feel like for Jaspar, he gets my badass award, just because it's like I feel like that would be extremely difficult to live your whole life where people forget you, and then having to introduce yourself to these people that like have like, especially for him for those 4 months, like he built a rapport and a relationship with these people, and literally for them to forget him in like 2 seconds, I feel like that would be extremely difficult, extremely lonely for someone. So that's why I wanted to give it to him, because I could just not, I like put myself in his shoes just to see like how that would feel. And boy, like as someone who enjoys being by myself, having the option of not having people remember me, I feel like would be a whole another ball game. So I gave it to him for everything that he went through. But obviously, honorable mention to Cordelia, because crap that she had to go through throughout the whole book.
I would like to nominate Mary, who was Cordelia's housekeeper. No, I'm just kidding. Mary is a great character.
You always do that
because it's fun. It's a fun joke for me. I don't care if anybody else likes it. I like it.
I mean, I liked Mary.
I did too.
Rude.
So this one was hard because I mean, Cordelia is a badass, but maybe not in the traditional sense that we use for making these nominations.
There's no traditional sense.
For me, the things that I think about, Barbara, I'm speaking for myself right now.
Okay.
All right. So for me, it was either Jaspar or Cordelia, just like Barbara said. And I think that at the end, it's going to be, I would choose Cordelia, because I think that, the stuff that she overcame, and the fact that, she's going through, mourning the death of her father, and then at the same time being yanked out of this life that she's gotten used to her entire life. It's all she knows is living as a lady in the, higher class society in this world. And to get yanked out of that, and literally, I mean, the person who, after her dad died, came and it's like, you need to leave. Like, he very rudely kicked her ass out of her house.
And literally,
and she's
like, right
can I take a carriage?
Yes.
Like, no, that carriage belongs to the kingdom. And that was everything. Like, no, that belongs to the kingdom. It's like, what the hell, man?
I know, dude.
It just felt so like, and it was like right after the funeral.
Yeah, like immediately.
Right.
But so yeah, I mean, I think that just because of that, because she lost her dad, who was the most important person in her life, and then she gets yanked out of the life she's used to and tossed into, living as I guess in these times, she was a peasant. Like, she went from being a lady in high society to working at a local inn as a barmaid, and she'd never done any of that. So I think it's maybe like a non-traditional badassery, if you think about like badass being like the big guy wielding a sword or whatever. But she is a badass because she overcame a lot in this book. And then, at the end, toss a cherry on top. It's like, oh, by the way, you've got magical powers, which we'll talk about more later. But I think that
your whole life was a lie.
Literally, like, it was just there's so much that got tossed on her. I think that
you were adopted.
She had to be the nominee for me anyway.
Right.
So I felt like Cordelia is an obvious choice, so I didn't choose it. I thought that Jaspar was good because of the reasons that Barbara mentioned too, just like having to overcome a life of basically loneliness and like being forgotten his entire existence. And then choosing, even though he knew that it could potentially hurt her, like choosing to honor the dad, like the captain, and his wishes, and like giving up the one like experience that he had of human connection, essentially, and like feeling loved and like belonging and people, somebody, that relationship, and just being willing to give that up to honor his promise to the captain. And so I think like he's badass. But then I also liked Gladys. Like obviously she's like more of a Mary joke, like badass character. But I felt like she was a good character. So but I'd probably go with Jaspar over Gladys, but I did like Gladys.
So I guess by 2-1, Jaspar is the winner of the Badass Character Award for this month. So let's talk about the other characters a little bit. So I guess we can start with Jaspar since he did win the Badass Character Award. Which of you would like to give us some background on Jaspar?
Jaspar shows up at the inn where Cordelia is barmaidening, and he basically is looking for her, but doesn't know he's looking for her. He was an apprentice under the captain. We don't really know a whole lot about his and the captain's relationship until much later in the book. We just know that he feels the loss of the captains in a similar way to how Delia feels. Obviously not the same because they weren't a family, but to him, that was kind of the only family that he ever knew.
It makes sense why he was grieving the way he did, because he was the only one who remembered him. And I was like, oh, that makes sense now.
Yeah, you don't really gather that till the end. So Jaspar is also Jazz. So for the first part of the book, he is this disguise, not like disguise, but like a alter ego kind of situation. Because he creates these alternate names and kind of personalities when he knows that he's going to have to leave a situation and not be remembered again. And so he is Jazz for a while, and he has a talisman that makes it so that they remember him, but only for a short period of time. He kind of forms relationships with the other fishermen and with obviously Delia. But we find out that he is is it a Hagen?
I think that's how
I said Hagen, like pagan.
I said Hagen.
It was Hagen. Yeah, we can ask Bethany about some of these pronunciation stuff when we have her on.
So we find out later that he was a Hagen, which is basically somebody that can control or wield fire and do different things with fire. And apparently that's like a ostracized kind of people. Like people are scared of them. They think they're evil monsters that burn villages and things. Right. So he has kind of an outcast vibe happening. And then also he's got this family curse that we find out about later where people just don't remember him after one encounter. So like he could go to the store and have a conversation and leave, and people would just think, man, like I feel like I just heard the door close, but like don't have any recollection of him, which is just crazy. So he obviously forms a romantic connection with Delia. We see that unfold.
Yeah, I think so too. I was just going to say, I thought it was in the world anyway, it was BS how the Hagens were treated. Like there's all these different elemental magic users, and Hagens, the ones that use fire, seem to be the only ones that kind of.
Well, I mean, she hinted at it. Bethany hinted at is the fact that like they have maybe caused some issues in the past, like there was like a history.
There's a group of them that like was like a terrorist group.
It's like one person ruins it for everybody.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like one little small group of people ruined it for everyone else. And I thought that was very interesting, and I really want to know more about that lore and that history too. One little thing I'm going to mention is it was funny, like Michael and I were talking about Jaspar and how Michael's like, I just don't see how he didn't realize the person he was looking for was right there, like it was Cordelia and then I turned to him, he's like, well, you know what, as a man I can see, never mind. He's like, we're so oblivious to things. I just kind of laughed. I didn't say it, he did. I would like to point that out. That's made true. No reference to that. He literally, like, I just saw him bitching about that and thinking about it, and then like a little light bulb thing moment for him, be like, you know what, never mind, I probably wouldn't have noticed.
Well, and one thing I did think about was the fact that he saw her at the funeral, and like we find out that he saw her at the funeral but then like didn't recognize her at the bar.
That's what I said. Michael,
he did see her at the funeral, but the way that her attire at the funeral was described, I don't think he would have been able to see her face. Because she was in her morning dress, and she was in like they had a mourning veil covering her face. So I think that he maybe could have seen a little bit, but not enough to have been like, oh, that's that girl. Like I don't think he got a good enough look.
Plus, Michael said, like, I forgot that he wasn't in, like front row and center. He never went up there and shook her hand. Like he stayed back, very far back, so no one could see him or notice him or
That's
any of
true.
that type
He was
of
kind of
stuff.
like, when you watch those movies with like spies in it, and like the spies like at the very back, like a few rows over, like leaning against a tombstone, watching the funeral happen. That was Jaspar.
Yeah.
But before we talk about Cordelia, I just want to say one thing that I'd give Bethany props on is I thought it was the way that she, for like the first half of the book, these two main characters, Cordelia and Jaspar, are becoming acquainted with each other and literally helping each other through the mourning process of losing, in Delia's case, her father, and in Jaspar's case, someone who was like a father. And they have no idea that they're mourning the same person. And I just thought that was the way that was all interweaved was really well done. Obviously, when they figured it out later on, it's like a big, what? Oh my God. But it was for them, not for the reader. But it was cool the way that was written, that, they were helping each other mourn the same person unknowingly. But anyway, moving on to the main character of the book, Cordelia, or as she goes by after she steps down from her ladyship. Delia
steps down, falls from grace because
kicked out of her house. Yeah, but yeah, so she's the main character. She starts out the book. The book opens up with her learning that her father has passed from a heart attack. I don't think that's what actually happened, but we don't know for sure yet, I guess. Or we won't know for sure.
We actually don't know how he died. Like, that was never explained
It just
yet,
says,
right?
like, at
It's
sea.
explained that it was a heart attack. That's what they say.
No, right.
But it's less. We're led to believe that there's some skepticism there.
Right, that's what I'm saying. Like, it's implied that wasn't actually what happened. But I feel like it was a deal that he made for something.
Feel like we'll find out later.
Yeah. This is one of the things where I'm very curious what happened.
And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that when we talk about Captain Kimbal. But so Delia, the book comes up, her dad dies, and then all of a sudden, like, the funeral happens, and the next day, some man shows up from. It'd be like if like the governor's assistant just came to your house and was like, "Hey, by the way, time to go. It's this belongs to us, and you're a woman, and women don't matter in this society." So, like, it was just crazy. And I mean, it's that's actually one of the things that was very realistic and made this, like, the historical aspect of it is like, I feel like this was set in like the equivalent of like
she said 18th century,
not medieval, but like Victorian time.
It's 18th century.
Is it 18th century? Okay.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I mean, literally, her dad died. She wasn't married, and he didn't have any sons. She was the only daughter, so she gets nothing because the kingdom is higher on the list of inheritors of his estate than his own daughter, just because she is an unmarried woman, which is insane. That is really how that worked at one point. But so that's what happens. She gets kicked out, and she has to figure out what to do next. And she goes to an inn in town, initially just, hoping to stay there for a few nights. And the innkeeper, who knows her, takes pity on her situation and lets her stay for free. And then eventually ends up offering her a job as a barmaiden. And that's a big piece of the book, watching her not only go through the mourning period, but learning how to be a barmaiden. And it was this really nice, what's the word I'm looking for? Not duology. You're seeing both sides of this. Like, there's the comedic fun aspect of like watching her comedically fail at being a barmaiden as she learns, but there's also the heavy side of it where she's going through the mourning and also like getting extremely frustrated with herself at times because she's not figuring it out. But yeah, so you get both, and I thought that was a really nice balance because that was the slower part of the book. It's a lot of character development for Delia's character and getting the dichotomy. That was the word I was trying to think of, between the sadness of dealing with her father's death and struggling with this new life, and some of the funny moments and lighter moments where, they had like her and Jaspar and some of the other people had like a fight with some flour at one point, like playing around and seeing her kind of come alive again, and was fun in that time as well. But so that's what happened there. I'm not going to go into super detail about her barmaiden times, but then she finds out that there's a truth out there waiting for her, and she has to go to Woodvale to figure it out. And
shout out Taylor Swift.
Yes, I'm sure you and Bethany will be talking about Taylor Swift a lot when she's on.
I've already texted her about that. I was like, oh my God, all the TS.
Did you?
Yes. Yes.
But so she does that, and she's trying to figure out what's going on. Along the way, she gets attacked by some people that she thinks are bandits, and somehow they are all taken down by water that just erupts from areas around her and deals with them. And then she notices at the end that she's completely dry. And that's the first hint that we get, a more definitive hint that, hey, maybe Delia's got some of this elemental magic herself. just confirmed a little bit later on, and that the people that were hunting her are not bandits, but are a group of people that are literally, their goal in life is to hunt down and kill these particular magic users that are water magic. Some of the elemental stuff, maybe I almost said waterbenders from from Avatar, because that's what it makes me think of a little bit. But yeah, so then that happens, and she finally gets to the place she's going, and we learn a little bit more about Jaspar and learn a little bit more about her.
Sure. So Gladys is someone that her father, we come to find out, but we don't originally know this, that her father, Cordelia's father, asked a few people after his untimely death to watch out for her. And I believe he asked Taylor to, I think, ask Gladys, I think is how it happened, to like watch out for her, because he's like, oh, she owns the inn, Taylor knows her, blah blah, they have a history. So that's who she is. She's
one of like a group of people, right, that he asked.
Right, she is. Like there's like 4 or 5 people that he asked to watch over her.
Yeah.
She is the tavern / inn, because back then that was a thing. I'm assuming like that's how those things worked, which makes sense, because if you think about it, if you're drinking, then you don't want to like walk home drunk or something like that, so it makes sense you would own it. Anyways, I digress. She is the owner of where I would say the bulk of the book setting happens, is in this tavern inn thing. So she's
I would say that's true. Yeah.
She's the owner of that. We come to find out that she has history with Taylor, which we'll get into, and she kind of takes Cordelia under her wing type thing and helps her. Like she gives her the job. She tries, like she sets up other job opportunities for her. Obviously, she didn't get any of those. She just kind of, like she is the Gandalf, I would say, of this, like she's the older, more experienced person that Cordelia kind of starts, like a found family type thing, where she helps her come out of her shell and is very protective of her and watches out for her. And that's a little bit of Gladys. And then you get a little bit of her story as far as how she knows Taylor and that they used to be in love, and she didn't choose him because of what she was dealing with in her grief process. I think it was helpful for her and Cordelia, because they kind of, I think they helped each other out with the whole grief process. Like Gladys went through that when she lost her parents, and then not choosing Taylor, and she's kind of regretting that and has regretted that. And then through Cordelia, because she told Cordelia like, oh, it'll get better type thing. And then I think she saw in herself too that she maybe didn't deal with her grief as well as she like thought she did, and then she's having these regrets that she wished she had with Taylor. So I'm hoping we get some connection next books for them, because I was invested in their love story as well.
I think you're right though. I think that Gladys saw an opportunity to be the person that she needed and didn't have when she was going through that, and so she was that person for Delia. So next is the brothers, which are the fishermen, Kevin, Iverson, and Trevin. They were really fun characters. They were fishermen, so they were traveling fishermen. So they didn't live in this town, but they were there a lot because their work brought them there, and they were frequently at the tavern drinking and having a good old time. And there was a lot of fun scenes at the beginning of the book with the three of them and Jaspar and Cordelia. I wouldn't say that they play like a major role in the book, but they're definitely pretty big side characters in the sense that they're big in the character development and kind of helping that along. And then they literally help Jaspar and Cordelia go from point A to point B at one point in the latter half of the book too. So
yeah, I enjoyed their banter and their back and forth between brothers and stuff like that. It felt very real. Fun. Yeah, it was really fun to read about.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I really also enjoyed the playful jabbing at the one brother who had a crush on the blacksmith, and like they would like do like the I don't know if either of you watched How I Met Your Mother. I'm pretty sure Lauren did, but there's a bit in that where Neil Patrick Harris's character would grab the main character and bring him up to a girl at the bar and say, "Hey, have you met Ted?" And then he would just leave. And they did that so many times to this poor man, and like to just purposely insert either him into something the blacksmith was doing at the bar or vice versa.
Yeah.
And it was kind of fun to see the playful jabbing between brothers
that they did for each other. Yeah,
they just seemed like good guys just in general, because even when they didn't recognize them later on, towards the end, like they still were like, hey, can we help, like, yeah. And so I think they were just kind of genuinely. Then Captain Kimbal, we have him next, and he, like, all we really know about him is, I mean, we learn a lot more about him at the end, but like what I lacked about Captain Kimbal is, like, she's really grieving the loss of her father, but I was hoping for like some flashbacks into like their relationship, I guess, because we didn't really get a whole lot of context of like what they were like before. And obviously you can imagine father-daughter, like positive relationship type situation. But we almost got more context of Captain Kimbal's relationship with Jaspar than we did with Cordelia. Needless to say, maybe that will be developed upon in future novels.
I was thinking the same thing.
But I think, like, with the captain, he was, we find out later that he was almost obsessed with kind of figuring out this Qualaris island and, like, finding it and figuring out the magic behind it. We figure out that he actually found Cordelia in the sea in, like, a basket and rescued her and was, like, her adopted father, not her actual father, which obviously adopted is actual, but not her blood father, but ultimately took her in. And it's kind of says later on that he stopped his search, or he paused his search for the island and like that sort of thing while he was raising her. He was the only one that, we don't really know why, we'll hopefully probably figure that out later on, but he was the only one that recognized Jaspar, and kind of they developed that bond.
Not the only one.
No. It was explained. It was because the Cordelia's mom's twin sister, Hygonia, I think is that how you pronounce her name?
Oh, that's right. We did see it.
Like blessed him or like did a spell on him or something like that. And that's because of that, that's why he remembers Jaspar. Yes, right. Yes.
Yep, that was it.
That's right. So yeah, the captain seems like a good guy overall, seems a little obsessive about this island.
I was going to say, do we
know why he died or what happened?
Yeah.
There's still some mystery around that.
Yeah,
there's a lot of mystery
whys for him, like why he's obsessed with the island,
right?
And like what that whole, like his relationship with the island and why he's so curious about it.
I'm really hoping we get some more captain history later.
Same. He's a very mysterious character that we get just enough of a taste, and I want more.
And I think we will get more. I think there's a little bit of a tease, and I think that it might even be, this may be early for predictions, but I think it might be because he's not dead. Maybe. It's one of my many predictions I had when reading the ending of this book. But
okay.
And then finally, the last character is Taylor. Taylor is another relatively minor character. It's the one that Barbara was mentioning before, that he and Gladys had a relationship at one point that didn't pan out. And we can talk about that a little bit later. She's hoping she gets to see, Barbara is hoping we see more of that in the future, and maybe we will. But let's move on to the questions. So first one is our staple. What did you like about the book? What did you dislike? Was there a specific point in the story that really hooked you in?
So I really enjoyed the magic in the world. I was wanting more, and this is the part that I'm excited for. Like, I cannot wait to read more about it in the future books. I think she gave us a taste of it, and I just really enjoyed it, and I want to see more, like, about the powers and how it works, the magic system, and we got a hint of all of this at the end, and I definitely want to see more characters that maybe have the different powers and how like they coexist with each other, because we know like the fire users, the Hagen, I think we decided is how you say it, obviously are seen as like maybe not so great people. So I'm curious to know like how they're going to all kind of live within each other in this world that she has created. I enjoyed the characters. I think they all felt 3-dimensional and not just thrown in there for like purposes of getting the plot moved or anything like that. Like the ones that we did get felt flushed out. And I think maybe that was a slight issue, because in the middle that's kind of like she was fleshing them out, and then we're kind of like, okay, character driven, not plot driven. Let's see here. The main characters had flaws and struggles, and it was nice to see them go through all that throughout the book. They weren't just like, oh, I'm so mighty and I don't have any issues. Like, we saw them struggle. They, miscommunication, all this other stuff, and them going through all that. That was nice. But like we mentioned before, I did struggle with the middle of the book as I found it to be a little slow, but luckily it did pick up after that. And I understand why it is, because of, like I said, it's character driven. So that tends to happen sometimes for that.
Got a lot of similar thoughts to you this time, Barbara. I really enjoyed the magic system. I thought that was cool, and I'm also drooling to get more, because it was only, I feel like we had a very small tease of the magic system in this book, and so I'm excited to see where that goes and what other types of magic there are that we see more of. The characters were really good as well. The main characters, especially, a lot of this was a very character driven book, as we've all talked about multiple times now, and that was really well done. The only thing there wasn't really much to say about what I disliked. The only real thing that I disliked a little bit was the same thing that Barbara mentioned. Just there was a point of the book that was pretty slow, but to be honest, it wasn't super long, and it did pick back up again. And then the point that really hooked me in, I think, and was like, oh my gosh, I can't stop reading at this point, was when Jaspar leaves the inn. This is when he's still trying to figure out who is Cordelia, where is the daughter of Captain Kimbal. And he takes his ship in the middle of a horrible storm to go visit this woman who's one of the other people that Captain Kimbal has entrusted with his daughter's safety. And that meeting left a lot of mystery as to, like, both Captain Kimbal and, what was going on in their past and the history. And it was very, very interesting. And it really, like, at that point, I was like, okay, I got to know the scope of what's happening in this. And so that was the moment that really hooked me.
Yeah, I enjoyed the characters. I loved the arc that we got to see with Cordelia, Delia, and how we get to journey with her through her grief and kind of her reinventing herself, but then coming back to herself and realizing that she didn't need to reinvent herself necessarily. I enjoyed the pieces of the magical world we got to see as well. That was interesting. I would say the only dislike I had was just that the first half just felt slow. There's a lot of dialogue and character background stuff, which I understand, especially since this is going to be a series. But I felt like maybe there was a bit too much details, or maybe unnecessary details at times, that kind of made it feel more dragged out. I do appreciate getting all the background, and I think that was good. When I read it, I didn't realize it was going to be a series. I thought it was a standalone, and so I think that helps play into that. I also wanted more of the magical world. That was just like a gripe that I had, but I understand why she did the way that she did too. I get mad at authors all the time for not giving me enough magic. So. But I anticipate that more magic will come in future books, and I feel like this was probably intentional. We'll get to ask her later on, but this was probably intentional to, like, draw you in to just get a little bit of magic and, like, leave you wanting more. So
I believe you're correct about that. So let's talk romance. What are your thoughts about Delia and Jaspar's slow burn romance? I actually, it's weird this is my question first. I'm not a huge romance fan, as I've said many times on this podcast, but I actually really enjoyed their relationship, because it started out in a place where they were friends and they were just trying to be, comforting to each other in a hard time that they were both having. Obviously, it's not hard to predict that it's going to lead to something more, because this is a YA book after all.
It has nothing to do with the YA. I feel like any romance is pretty obvious.
Been interrupted.
I'm just saying.
Let me know when I can continue.
You can't.
Okay. So I did. I enjoyed their relationship. I thought that the slow burn aspect of it was nice. It was fun to see that build and grow. It always feels more realistic to see a relationship like that grow more organically than some other fantasy books and other books in general, where I saw him and immediately pictured our wedding day and our children and the rest of our lives together. So, like, this was nice to see. Like, it felt more real, and I appreciated that as someone who's not a huge romance fan.
Yep, I enjoyed their romance. It was very predictable, but I feel like somewhat the love stories can be more predictable because of the YA target audience. So I feel like that makes sense, that it was not necessarily, because if your target audience is YA, even though lots of adults also read YA, I feel like the expectation isn't that they're little, like, sleuths trying to solve predict everything. Maybe not. But like I knew pretty quickly that they would end up together. She would somehow be the only one able to remember him, all of those things. But I so rarely get to accurately predict things, so that made me happy. I liked their romance. I didn't mind that it was predictable. I thought that it was fine. And I think that there were enough aspects that, or there will be enough aspects that are not predictable, like how they kind of navigate more of the magical realm and all of that.
So I love me slow burns. That is my bread. Well, I like a lot of things for romance, but I enjoy slow burns. I actually have always hated insta love because I just feel like it's not. Maybe it is. Maybe that does happen to some people, but I just feel like it's not realistic in a real setting. Maybe it is. I don't know. But I just appreciate that this was not that. I enjoyed the slow burn. And honestly, I was fine. And I wouldn't have even minded if we would have more pining and that they didn't get resolved in this book and that would have like bled into the second book.
Barbara wants 7 books of slow burn romance.
And got real slow burn stuff.
I would have been mad about that, so I'm glad she didn't do that.
I would have been okay with that, personally, because I have read books where, like, I'm just like, just kiss, and they don't, and you have to wait until, like, the second book towards the end, and you're just, like, victory, and it just feels that much sweeter when they get together. But, obviously, I enjoyed the romance. As far as YA being predictable, I have to disagree with both of you guys. I feel like even adult books, when two characters start falling for each other, I feel like it's pretty obvious when they start making little heart eyes at each other.
Oh yeah.
You know?
I'm saying more just like the predictability of like
how she would be the only
one
that
that remembered him, and then they would fall in love, and then like they're grieving together, and like all of those pieces. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with the love story. Like, I like it. I think it's great. And I think it appeals to a big audience. And obviously there's a bunch of super predictable, like, adult novels too, with the romance space. But what I was saying is, I feel like if your audience is younger kids, teenagers, things like that, like the predictability factor doesn't bother them as much as it does when you're an adult. Does that make sense? I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like as a teenager, I didn't even think about the fact that it was predictable. I was, just enthralled with the story.
Right. You're just there for a good time.
And all of that. You're just there for it, right? But
yeah.
I think
like your mind doesn't start doing that.
Yeah. From the adult lens, I think it's more like, for me, it's like, well, that was pretty predictable. But like, so it's slightly less satisfying as an adult as it would be with my like teenage mind. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But
fair enough. I just had to put that little in because I don't think that's just a YA thing for romance. Like,
Barbara, steadfast defender of YA.
No, I am. First off, yes on that. But
I like YA. I'm not like
I just feel like the
YA.
Like, maybe it's just because Michael can't pick up on like romance even in adult stuff. He's like, I'm surprised these people like each other. I was like, really? You didn't see like this longing stares that like no human would ever be like staring at a person for 10 seconds longer than they should have appropriately type thing? Or like,
I will point out it's unfair for Barbara to criticize anyone else on their predictive abilities when she's
my god,
that's fair.
Whatever. Okay, moving on.
Were there any moments in the book that took you by surprise, and if so, what were they? And it's Lauren's turn to go first. Looking at these notes, she can just answer for all of us, so go ahead, Lauren.
Yeah, except for I liked Barbara's wording, so I'm going to let her go.
Oh, I put, and I quote, Jaspar's G-Daddy is the big bad. Was not expecting that one.
Yeah, that's what I put. I mean, I think the most surprising part for me was the history in Jaspar's family, and just the fact that, like, that kind of started the beginning of the end for his line of people was probably the most surprising.
Yeah. I was not expecting his great, I don't know how, like, that, like, great grandfather.
It was like, great to the
10th degree type thing to be.
You just say his ancestor.
Oh yes, his ancestor to be the ultimate baddie and the cause of all these issues and stuff like that. I was not expecting that. So
yeah, or that his family was originally cursed by Cordelia's aunt.
Cordelia's mom.
Cordelia's mom? I thought the mom was the one we met.
The mom is the cursed one? Michael. The mom is the one who can curse people, and the aunt is the one who
can heal.
Heal. Thank you. I was like, what does
But
she
I
do?
got
She
those two
heals.
confused. I mean, I wouldn't have.
I got that twisted. I guess I thought the mom was the one
No.
that could heal.
No.
Okay.
I do like that, like, because, like, normally when you think, like, oh, you know, a person who curses people is evil, and I really liked how the sister was like, no, screw you, that's not how it works. She's actually a really nice human being. It's just her power, just like the fire users, and that's why I think it's hinted at. Once again, I'm digressing. Anyways, it's hinted upon that, like, what you do with your power doesn't, like, just because you have these powers doesn't make you evil or good. It's how you use your powers. Anyways.
Well, and she also said that, like, she never put a curse on anyone who didn't
deserve it. Yeah.
Because like Uncle Ben says, with great power comes great responsibility. Anyway, speaking of the fire users, what did you think of the magic system developed by the author here? Do you hope to see other types of elemental magic users in future books?
Obviously, yes. I feel like I've been harping on this. I really enjoyed it, and I wanted to learn more about it, and I'm excited to see what other magic there is, what other types of users there are. I just definitely want more of this, because obviously there's like curse and healers and all that, so I just want to see them all, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Same. I am also I want more. I want to learn more about the magic system. I really liked the system that was developed. I want to learn more about the Hagans. I want to learn more about what Cordelia is. And then I also want to, I'm hoping in any way that we see other elemental schools of magic pop up too.
Yep, I'm here for it. I'm here for the magic system. I wanted more. I feel like probably future books will include people who can somehow control air, wind, earth type situations, in addition to more characters that probably have the water and fire abilities.
Yep. I think so too.
All of it.
All right. Next question. Jaspar is cursed to never be remembered. How do you think it would feel to live like that? Man, lonely. Very, very lonely. You're cursed to effectively develop these initial relationships with people, and then the second you're out of their line of sight, or you leave the premises that they're in, it's gone. They don't know who you are anymore. Maybe if you're like a mastermind criminal, that would be a fantastic thing to have, because no one would remember that you committed a crime against them. But no, I think that for everybody else, it'd be very, very lonely.
I feel like it would be fun for like a couple days, and then I would be over it. Like I could break into Disney World or something and like ride all the rides and do all the things, and nobody's gonna remember me, and I would never like. Yeah. Now that's my like master criminal plan. Break into Disney.
No, I think
people like steal money.
I would like be able to sneak into like a Universal, a Harry Potter castle, and like do all the things, skip all the lines, and nobody's gonna remember me to like hate on me. But yeah, I think it would be intriguing for like a very short time period, and it'd be very lonely.
And once the shenanigans were over and the novelty of it wore off, it would be horrible.
100%.
Yeah, I definitely. Like, when I was thinking about it, like you guys said, like, originally it would be fun because you're like, oh, look at all these things I can do and no one's going to remember. And then after a while, you're like, oh my God, no one remembers me. And it made me think, like, obviously he uses aliases because I feel like it's easier to have someone forget not you than being like, hey, this is me. And you put yourself out there and no one remembers it. So it's like, what is the point? You know, so he probably got used to just making up these characters because no one's going to remember him anyways. I feel like
he literally
really
said that
sad.
at the end. Yeah. He said, like, I was Jazz because then people would forget Jazz, but not Jaspar.
But not Jaspar, yeah. And I was like, oh, so sad. I know, that broke my little heart because you just kind of feel for someone like that. And it's funny because it's one of those things, not to jest, and Michael's like, oh, great responsibility, power stuff. Like, he could have used this to his benefit as far as like stealing from people or not paying for things or just being an awful human, and instead you just see like this lonely boy who like just wants a family, who just wants someone to remember him for him. So I thought that was really interesting, and yeah, I really enjoy his character, and I feel like my little heart, my little marshmallow Jaspar.
You can only ride Hagrid's ride so many times before you start to get lonely.
You need a partner for that one to make it more fun.
You do.
Anyway, the setting of the story is in Mikiria during the 18th century. Hey, there it is. It's even in my own notes. And I
that's why I was like, hello.
How does the historical backdrop contribute to the overall atmosphere and themes of the book? And what elements of historical fantasy did you find most intriguing or well developed?
I enjoyed the historical aspect of it. I think this is a genre that's not super popular or common, but maybe should be, or maybe it is popular and common. I just haven't read that many historical fantasy books, YA books, because I feel like in the historical fantasy, like, is a thing, but not necessarily combined with YA. But I also just could not have experience with that genre. I think the history of Cordelia literally like losing her entire life when her dad passed is insane to think about today. But like that really did happen. I don't know if it happened exactly like that because obviously I wasn't alive back then. But I feel like that sounds about right. And I always like a good historical fiction, just in general. And this one had magic too, which was a double win.
Yeah, I don't think I'm very familiar with 18th century things. I'm trying to think if I am or not, but I want to say I'm not. But it did make me think about like all the women who actually had to go through exactly what Cordelia had. It's just crazy to think that back then, if you were a woman, you weren't allowed to owe anything if you weren't married, and it just went to your husband. Like, it did not matter if he was like a peasant. If he got married to a lady who could inherit all this stuff, like just automatic status type thing. So it's just crazy. It reminds me of the newest Little Women, where Florence Pugh's character is talking about like how, because what's his face was like, why do you care? Why do you want to marry a rich person? And she's like, because if I'm not married, I owe nothing. Everything that I currently have right now is not mine. I have to get married so the husband can get it. And it's just crazy to think that's actually a thing.
It makes you wonder how often back then people who were not straight people got into straight marriages and relationships because they otherwise like would have had nothing.
Yeah.
Like how often, I mean, because obviously various sexualities didn't just appear one day. Like,
right. It didn't just sprout out in the early 2000s and be like, here we are, we're gay. Like,
they've become a lot, like it's become a lot more widely accepted than it once was. But you know that shit was happening back then. And then you think about those women who like are not wanting those types of relationships, just like having to feel forced into to have a livelihood. Like, it's just crazy.
Right. Yeah. It's just, yeah.
F the patriarchy.
That's great. But so yeah, I actually really enjoyed the setting. I thought that the world she built was both exciting as far as a fantasy world, but also grounded enough in history to be interesting. I don't know. I was thinking about this earlier. I don't know if I've read many historical fantasy books, and I thought that was.
I feel like we have though. If you think about it, like the T1, that one's based off of
Chinese. Yeah,
like
Chinese
history.
But that one wasn't YA, was it?
Yeah, it is.
Oh, it is. Okay.
Yeah, or I don't know if I don't know if Lauren read it, but the one that is based off like Romeo and Juliet, that's technically based off of historical Japan. Is it Japan?
Yeah. Yep. No, you're right. Okay, that's fair.
It's like that's all technically historical fantasy based books. Yeah. It's just, I guess y'all didn't realize that.
Yeah, I definitely didn't. But I really enjoyed it, and I enjoyed it in the books that you mentioned too that I didn't think about. But I did enjoy the historical fantasy aspect and the root in history. There were obviously aspects of it that, like Lauren and you both mentioned, Barbara, that were depressing. Thinking about that's how women actually were forced to exist at that point. But it added some interesting layers to the story for sure. I thought it was well implemented. Let's see. Next, Cordelia experiences profound grief and loneliness throughout the story. How does the author effectively convey these emotions through Cordelia's thoughts, actions, as well as interactions with other characters?
Yeah, I feel like Bethany did a good job of making the reader understand Cordelia's actions and how she moved through the world while dealing with her grief and the loneliness. Like, her motivations and actions made sense for what she was going through, and I think it was just overall done really well to see how she progressed throughout that in the whole process, and how other characters affected that with Gladys and Jaspar and even the brothers. And you can see her like coming out of her shell with all that. I think that was done very, very well. That aspect, 100%.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. I think that the way that I mean, it's like other things we talked about in this book. The way that it all happened, like I was talking about how the relationship forming organically, like it felt like the grief felt very real. It felt like you were really, experiencing or watching someone that go through the cycles of grief when they lose someone that's that important to them. And again, like Barbara said, props to Bethany. It was very, very, very well done. And it wasn't just, I feel like in a lot of books where a character loses someone that's really important to them, like their spouse or their child or their parent or sibling, pick somebody, best friend, anybody that's really important to the character. A lot of times that death is just used briefly to push the story forward. I think it's called fridging if it's the girl that dies for the guy's sake, but maybe that's across the board. I don't know. But
I think just in general, fridging is the term. It's not necessarily just for women, but yes.
So what I really liked with what Bethany did with this book is, so yes, Captain Kimbal's death did push the story forward, but it wasn't just there for that. It was an integral part of the story, and I feel like, how when you lose someone special that's really important to you, for a long time after that, even when you're starting to feel better, like there's sprinkles of that in every part of your life. And I think that we saw that with Cordelia, and like as she's going through things, it wasn't just like dad died and then pushed to the rest part of the story. We never talked about it again. Like it was sprinkled in, like there were things that would happen that would remind her, and then she'd get so it felt very real. And I think that aspect of it was really, really well done by the author.
Yep, I agree. She did a great job of providing readers with insight into the kind of internal turmoil that Cordelia was facing. I also just really appreciated the way she incorporated the grief into the other characters, and then the perspective that was mentioned several times, I think first maybe by Gladys, about grief never going away entirely, but getting smaller or less with time. It's like the ball in the box analogy that I always use with my clients, which for the sake of time, people can Google if they want to, but basically just a really well done portrayal through a novel of the grief process.
So moving on to our next question. Cordelia's journey through grief and loss, as we just talked about, is a central theme of the book. How do you think the author portrays the different stages of grief, and how do you think Cordelia's journey resonates with readers who may have experienced similar emotions or losses in their own lives? So, like I said, the last question, I think that obviously it's a huge part of the book, and it's sprinkled into everything. I think that the stages of grief were portrayed very, very realistically. Like I said, I think that if there was someone who was reading this book that had lost a parent, they would be feeling a lot of parallels with some of the things that Cordelia is going through as she's like, learning to adapt to her new life without her dad. And I think that because it's so well written and it's so real, the grief, I think that if that is you and you're reading this book and you lost a parent, that I think that there are multiple times. So there were multiple times in this book where Cordelia's grief got to me. I haven't lost a parent, but I think that if you were in that situation and you could parallel even more, I think that there are moments in this book where it would probably profoundly affect you more than someone else. And I think that's, again, kudos to Bethany for the stages of grief, and everything she was going through just felt very real. It wasn't just there for the story. It was an integral part of the book.
Yeah. And I think, when you read the the post author's notes at the end, it makes sense knowing that this book was inspired by her own grief journey. She shares about that at the end of losing her own father. And so I think that she could really, as an author, weave in her own experiences in, and you really see that. I think, Cordelia's journey is very relatable to a great many people, which will surely help many readers who have experienced loss to be able to connect with a character in a book on such a deep level. So I think she's done something, like basically created something beautiful that has the potential to affect a lot of people through her own grief journey, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, I think if you've experienced any type of loss, then you'll feel a certain kindred spirit with Cordelia. Like, it doesn't have to necessarily be a parent. Like, it can be grandparents, family, friend, child, even animals, I would say, go into that, So I think you can empathize with her and reading how she was processing her grief felt even a bit cathartic for me, because yeah, it's true. Like, you might have lost a person like 10 years ago, and then something little reminds you of them, and then like you're right back to that feeling. And I think anyone who's experienced loss goes through those emotions. So I think there's not much left to say. There's just, I think this aspect was done very, very well, and you can tell that it's someone who has experienced this, because that this is how it is. And obviously people grieve differently, but I think feeling the aspect that Cordelia felt guilty and moving on, because that's what you feel like. It's like, oh, I'm happy, but then you want to be sad because you've lost someone, and it's like this inner turmoil. And she did a good job of explaining all that and showing that.
Yeah, no, I agree. She definitely did. So, other theme the book explores is family, belonging, and community. How do these themes intersect with Cordelia's personal journey, and how do they influence her decisions and actions as we see the story unfold?
I loved these themes throughout the book, honestly. I felt like Cordelia lost her entire family, including the house staff that she'd grown up with and loved. At least we think she lost them entirely until we get closer to the end. And then found belonging and community at Gladys's tavern. And so she had a new place to call home, new people who cared about her, kind of that found, like, family you choose sort of vibe. And then also with Jaspar, Jazz shows up, and we see his own story unfold of a lifelong struggle with his loneliness and lack of family unit, until the captain was able to remember him, and they kind of formed that bond. So he was also grieving the captain's loss, but we don't really realize how much that meant to him until kind of towards the end. But he was also finding kind of a new home to belong alongside Delia. And so I think that I really liked the themes. They were consistent throughout and for multiple characters.
Yeah, agree with what you said. I've said before, I feel like this is a found family, in that Cordelia lost her father, but gained like other people who fiercely loved her, and she allowed them to love her. Because at first she was hesitant to allow herself to belong to other people and have these people to rely on, but as she processed everything, she slowly let herself be loved again. And like Lauren mentioned, like, you can see that with some of the other character, like Jaspar, who's never had anyone, and then had Captain Kimbal and then lost him, and then he also goes through that with the same kind of people, which is kind of cute that they're all like the same. And I would say it at a certain point to Gladys as well, like we've kind of touched base on that. So I think I enjoy that, but I've always enjoyed the found family trope aspect of books.
I also enjoy the found family trope in everything. I think that it was really well done. And you see, obviously we've talked about how like Cordelia lost her dad and then got yanked out of everything she's ever known. And I can't imagine that happening. And I can't imagine even taking a step further, like what would have happened if she hadn't found this community. Like if her dad hadn't taken steps to make sure there were people that would help and take care of her, make sure she was okay. And like, I think it was in different ways, it was good for everyone involved, because like Cordelia had lost her family and everything she knew, and she needed a community, she needed a home, and she got one through Gladys and the other people that work and live at the inn. Gladys had never really had a family because she experienced love with Taylor, but chose not to marry him and had never had love after that. And I think she saw Cordelia as the daughter that maybe she never had. Jaspar was a character that never could have anybody. And for this brief moment in time, he was able to not only have a community of people that cared about him, but they all remembered him, because until Cordelia figures out what's going on, and then that's what the amulet has done for Jaspar, is it's frozen his curse, I guess you might say. And so he probably for the first time in his life is experiencing what it's like to have friends and family and a community that cares about you. And we see that in the scene where I was talking about. The one that really hooked me was when he went out in the storm to go talk to that woman. But before that, when he's going out in the storm, the three brothers who are the fishermen are like getting on him and getting angry with him. Like, what are you doing? Like, this is stupid. Why would you want to go out in this? And we get a little bit of Jaspar's internal thinking. And like, you could tell he's never had anybody that was looking out for him. And it was really hard for him to be like, because he needed to go. But at the same time, he's like, holy crap, like these guys really love me. They don't want me to get hurt. And that was cool to see all of that unfold for everybody, not just Cordelia. I think everybody had some skin in the game for this theme.
Yeah. I also think, just digressing briefly, that the way that the captain prepared everybody to look out for his daughter also just screams not a heart attack, because are you planning your heart attack? Is that something
no, I think you're
clearly,
right.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Either he's not dead, or he knew
maybe
that he was going to die.
Right. Maybe his power was reading into the future, and so he knew. Yeah. Who knows? We're gonna find out, I hope.
Yeah, it could be that. It could be like what Barbara said, that he had a deal with some supernatural entity and he knew that his time was up. It could be that he feared that someone would come for him and kill him, and so he set this up. We'll find out. But speaking of finding out, what did you guys think about the ending?
Okay, this ending, first off, didn't know it was going to be a cliffhanger, because obviously we've already discussed that at least Laura and I did not realize that. B, after Michael told me about a cliffhanger ending, even when I was I think 70 something % in, he told me about it. I still was not expecting this type of a cliffhanger. My butt was it's gonna be I thought maybe it was going to be this is, you have magical powers, or this is, and then that's type of the cliffhanger, or you are getting shot at, and then magical powers, or maybe Jaspar is, something happens to him. I didn't think it was going to be the whole freaking people outside of Gladys and Taylor. The three brothers are screwed. Jaspar is screwed. Cordelia is screwed. We're gonna drown. What's going on? I was not expecting that type of a cliffhanger. And I swear to God, if this doesn't open with, the second book doesn't open with, we are fine, I'm gonna be very angry. I'm hoping, maybe a new magic user will swoop in and help them. I don't know. Where's Auntie when you need her ass? I go know where you at. Yes, I was just shocked. Well, plus also, you find out Cordelia is a water user, so you just think, hey girl, make a bubble over your head, a la Harry Potter, I don't know, figure something out.
Yeah, she didn't know how to use her powers yet, so so I guess the ending was interesting. It was I knew it was going to be a cliffhanger. I wasn't expecting this kind of a cliffhanger, like Barbara said. So two things. First, Bethany, well done. Great cliffhanger. Applause.
Kudo.
Second, screw you, Bethany, because you left us with the entire main cast that we've grown to love, and they all might be dying or dead, and we don't know. And so I'm glad that your next book comes out shortly so we can figure it out. But
Bethany and I are going to have some words.
Right?
Lauren's going to have a strongly worded question for you on our next bonus episode when you come to guest or be a guest. But yeah, no, the ending was good. It was it's not what I expected at all. Even when it comes to cliffhangers, and I thought it was really well done. I'm very excited to see what happens next. All
my flabbers were gasted, y'all. All of them.
I had to unmute myself for that. I was not expecting that.
I cannot believe that I read that much to be left with such a cliffhanger. I was so invested those last few chapters and figuring out what was about to go down. And I was so sure that somehow Jaspar or Delia would find a way to save themselves, or that even that Jaspar and the others would be forced to leave her, and then suddenly she'd wield her magic beyond all odds and save herself. But no, as it reads, they all drown with the ship. So obviously I know that won't happen since it's a trilogy, but I was so angry. And I mean, yes, this is a well done cliffhanger, but I was definitely one of those books where I put it down and I was like, what the hell, Bethany? What did you just do to us?
I mean, maybe they all die and we're stuck learning about new characters in the second book.
I would put that book down. I would not. I would go back and change my review.
She is the chosen one. The chosen ones don't die this early.
We're going to break the trope. Who knows?
There's no way that they die.
The last question, More Than Life, a YA historical fantasy, as you now all know, and we've talked about a lot, is the first book in a planned trilogy. Considering the events and themes introduced in the book, what expectations or predictions do you have for the subsequent books, and what unresolved questions or storylines are you most interested in exploring further? And so for me, outside of the stuff we already talked about, like obviously I want to know, are they dead? What's going to happen? How are they going to escape this harrowing situation? But larger scale, I want to know more about Cordelia's powers. I want to know how are we gonna grow into that? Who's gonna teach her? Because Jasper's not a water magic user, so presumably, I mean, I wouldn't imagine that he has any idea how to help her. And so I want to know what new character we're going to be introduced to that is the big magic user. Let's see what else. I hope we get some better closure for what happened to Captain Kimbal. I hope that obviously, ideally, he's not dead. He had to fake his own death to save his daughter or something, or protect her. If we don't get that, then I'd like at least some closure as to what actually happened, because like we've talked about many times, I don't believe it was a heart attack. Or if it was a heart attack, it was one that he knew was coming because he made like a deal with the devil or something, and he had an expiring contract or something like that.
I think he's living on the island.
Could be.
Mm-mm.
But yeah, I mean, those are the things that I want. My prediction, the only one I've really laid out, is that I'm predicting that Captain Kimbal is alive. But beyond that, I'm very curious to hear what Barbara's predictions are, since she's our psychic queen.
False advertising.
Well, sorry for you, but I get to go before her. So, I want more magic, please, Bethany. More magic. There will be more magic, I hope. I need to know more about the snake people, too. Like, what the hell is that about? We got, like, a glimpse into these snakish people. And I need to know about that. More of Delia honing her powers and using them for badassery would be good. And maybe a magical fire-throwing, water-yielding baby running around someday.
That's a fun visual.
I know, that's what I just picture, like a baby.
Makes
like,
me think
fire,
of the baby in The Incredibles, where it like has superpowers and is a baby.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can't just that like little baby running around messing everything up, like just blowing things up.
On that note, I definitely also want more magic. I want more adventuring and maybe new characters with different magical powers. That's what I'm hoping for. How the magic system kind of works, like I guess with Lauren's baby theme, do they inherit the same power? Like if you're part of the fire wielding, will you always be a fire wielder? It doesn't seem like that, because I remember Jaspar saying that his dad, one of his uncles maybe, or grandpa or something, like built up his little place that he lived in. So, and that seemed more like glass blowing type thing, or building of some sort. So maybe not. I don't know. Maybe definitely we'll see more of how Jaspar and Cordelia deal with the knowledge of their background, because that was just kind of like a lot for them to take in. Jaspar's great daddy being the big bad, Cordelia being a semi-goddess, demi-goddess child type thing, all the things. More of Cordelia learning about her powers and how it works. And obviously, if they survive that cliffhanger, which I'm assuming they are, because she's the chosen one, and like I mentioned, chosen ones don't die this early in the book.
Okay. All right, we've reached the end of another episode. That means we're going to talk about our individual scores. Barbara, what did you give the book?
I gave it a 7. I think this is a good start of a series. It had a little bit of a pacing issue for me, but I feel like sometimes that's the issue with a trilogy, is you have to maybe set up characters, set up the world, and you can kind of get a little lost in that on the first book, and then the second and third hit, or vice versa, where like the first one had all these things, and then the second one's the slump. So it's like a thing that happens. But I think overall I enjoyed it. I am excited to read the second one to see what happens with these characters. And I was really intrigued with the history and the magic, and I want to see more of that.
All of those things are also true for me. I also gave the book a 7. I thought it was really well done. I think it's fantastic, especially when you consider it's her first book that she's ever written. So pretty great. It was a really good book, and I'm also excited to read the sequel and figure out where these characters end up next.
Samesies. I gave it a 7. I was between like a 6 and a 7, but I feel like this being her first novel, A, and B, the fact that like I originally would have rated it based on me reading it, not knowing about all of the things that I should have known because I didn't read the back of the book, which is my own fault.
Cute.
So I gave it a 7. I think I really enjoyed the characters. I really enjoyed like the little bit of magic that we got. I am looking forward to seeing what happens and unfolds in the future books, which I don't always say. So good job, Bethany. Even though you pissed me off. It's okay.
Whoa.
I forgive you.
For now.
We all love Bethany, right? And I can love a book and an author and still be angry with the way that they ended the book because now what? Now what?
Well, Bethany, if you're listening to this episode right now,
for our fees going to talk to someone about this.
If you're listening right now, Bethany, I guess prepare yourself for Lauren in the interview episode because who knows what she's going to come with.
I'll be nice.
The first question: how dare you?
How dare you? I feel like though the mark of a good author is the ability to elicit emotions from your readers. So you know, it's a compliment. It's a
Love
compliment.
or hate.
Yeah, very true. Like always, make sure you're following Badass Literature for free in your favorite podcast app. Give us a rating and leave us a review if they allow you to. Super important for us. We love getting the feedback. Also, don't forget to follow us on social media. Our username is @BadassLitPod on both Instagram and Facebook.
Have feedback about today's episode? Well, tough cookies. We don't care. No, I'm just kidding. Contact us by writing to badassliteraturesociety@gmail.com. You can also send us a DM or leave a comment on Instagram or Facebook.
We are very excited to be back with you. And as always, thank you so much for listening. I'm Michael.
This is Barbara.
And I'm Lauren.
Bye.
See you on the flip side. Bye.
Bye.